different needs of all of the students in their schools, and that not all students should be university bound. And so they try to provide the students with a variety of options, and community college is certainly one of them. And all of the documents, the community college works closely with the schools to make sure that their information, their calendars, and their syllabus are in the schools and are made available to students who are considering their future. And you know, I believe that, as I said, the profile has changed, and the attitude and the outlook towards community colleges has changed, and the success stories that are coming out of that are a testament to that.
Thank you. The Honourable,
With that, Madam Minister, I'll wrap it up, and I wish to thank you, the Deputy and staff, for providing answers to my questions. And certainly, like most teachers, you have the endurance to go beyond 4 o'clock.
Order, please. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. The Committee on Supply will adjourn until 6:30 and reconvene at that time to continue with the estimates of the Department of Education. Order, please. We've reached the moment of interruption. The subject of this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North. Therefore, be it resolved that this government move forward with its intention to have the Fisheries and Loan Board accept licenses as collateral for new entrants. The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's truly a privilege and an honour to be standing here before you tonight to speak about this important topic of the intention of having the Fisheries Loan Board accept licenses as collateral for new entries. This is one of my major concerns I have for a number of, in fact, for decades now. I've been tied to municipal level, and I've been involved with fishing organizations for the past 3 decades, and I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that this has been a concern to myself. In fact, I've been so concerned that if we do not address this particular issue, I'm concerned that we're setting ourselves up for the licenses and the control of these licenses to be in the hands of a few people. In fact, a few companies. And some of my people who are challenged me on this will say, well, what's wrong with the company? You know, they'll quickly point out that our Bluenose, the most famous schooner in Nova Scotia, was actually owned by a company. And it's interesting, I did a little research on this, Mr. Speaker, and if I could take you back to 1920, and the Captain Angus Walter's ship, and Mr. Walters agreed to be captain of the new vessel if he could own the controlling number of shares. 350 shares were sold across Canada to cover the $35,000 cost of the vessel. The Bluenose Schooner Company was formed. In 1921, the Bluenose was launched at Lunenburg. Mr. Speaker, this famous example is clearly a case of owner-operator. And there's something also, if you look at this particular vessel, and I want to make the comparison of a famous ship and the licenses that represent independence in a number of coastal communities across Nova Scotia. Mr. Walters was a majority owner of the company, and neither at the time when the Bluenose came to its last useful life, Mr. Walters was troubled. He was troubled with this. He wanted that particular vessel to stay in Nova Scotia. And I'll just read a couple comments here from this note. Neither the government or the fisheries companies nor the town of Lunenburg offered to help save the ship, which angered and saddened Captain Walters. He wanted to have the schooner preserved. And I'll just quote some of his comments from Mr. Walters, and I quote, Her passing is a national sorrow. Captain Walters was so haunted by the loss that he even considered putting together an expedition to raise her. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, like Mr. Walters, if we do not do something to address the need of having loans or fishermen having access to capital to keep the license in these coastal communities, this government is going to be haunted by that. It's also noted that for a number of years, we have been trying to have the governments of Nova Scotia address this particular issue. And at present, we have two bills. One that has been proclaimed, Bill number 257, which I raised a question in the budget estimates yesterday or a couple of days ago. And this bill talks about Fisheries and Coastal Resource Act, dealing with this topic of capital access. I asked this to the minister, Mr. Speaker, and the response was, we're waiting for the FIDs. We're waiting for the FIDs to deal with this. And there's an old English proverb. If I can just go back to my notes here, there's an old English proverb, and it talks about time and tide waits for no man. And I think that's an important topic because time is running out on this government. They've had enough time to deal with this. The past governments and people are paying attention. And this takes us into a new direction because what we have here now, we're dealing with, across Canada, we're dealing with a new Fisheries Act. It's called Bill C-145. It's very interesting to note that it's been 139 years since we've had an act, almost as close as the age of the original Blue Nose. And it's time to deal with these particular issues. And I think the fishermen across Nova Scotia, they want two things, Mr. Speaker. They want to recognize that we need this loan board issue addressed. And they say also know the need to be consulted on this new Fisheries Act. And I'm going to suggest one thing here tonight, is that we form an all-party committee, we take a delegation to Ottawa, and we deal with both of them. Yeah, I want to go to Ottawa. And it's interesting that we have veteran journalists across Nova Scotia, veterans, who are deeply respected through coastal communities when they're talking about fishing issues. And I'm going to just identify one person here. This person's name is Ralph Surratt. He wrote an article dealing with the Fisheries Act a number of weeks ago. And this person, again, is deeply respected, and his word, you can take it to the bank. It's interesting to note that he had a lot of comments, a lot of emails, and I can go on. Basically, he criticized the Fisheries Act of lack of consultations across Canada, and this was a reply from the minister's office. And I'm going to quote from a newsletter here. British Columbia MP Randy Camp, parliamentary secretary to the Fisheries Minister Hearn, called him to say, I was wrong on every point, to give me the heavy news that the government of Canada is unhappy with you. He pointed out that he was wrong on every point. And I suggest you read the article. And I suggest you go down to the wharfs and talk to the fishermen. And I don't believe for 1 minute that Mr. Surratt was wrong on every issue. In fact, he was right on all of them. And I want to tell you one thing, that if the Minister of Fisheries thinks that he can make a phone call and intimidate Nova Scotian, he is deadly wrong, because he's going to spend a lot of time on the telephone calling all the fishermen, all their wives, all the community leaders, and the list is growing. And I can name you 29 groups, environmentalist groups, that is opposed and wants to be consulted on that bill. There are fishermen from east coast of Canada putting a petition together as we speak, from east coast to west coast. And the Minister of Fisheries, he wants to have some money behind him because you're going to make a lot of phone calls, and he will not intimidate the fishermen of Canada. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that you can feel the emotion in this particular topic with me, because we have been dealing with this for a number of years, decades. It will not go away, and I offer you a simple solution. You put together our fisheries critics, all-party committee. Let's go to Ottawa, bring Mr. Hearn here, let's do it. It's not going to go away, and we want it done. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to stand in my place tonight to discuss this resolution. Therefore, be it resolved that this government move forward with its intentions to have the Fisheries and Loan Board accept licenses as collateral for new entrants. And, Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank the MLA from Dartmouth North for bringing this resolution forward. As many of the members know, the Nova Scotia Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture has been and continues to take an active interest in the fishery of this province. As you all know, as we all know, the fishing industry is tremendously important to our economy and to our coastal communities. Mr. Speaker, this resolution appears to be a simple request. However, the issue is quite complex. It involves the larger issue of intergenerational transfers of assets among fishermen and their families. This is, of course, a worthy and an important goal of my government, and that has been working on, and we have been working on this for a number of fronts for many years. As I have said, Mr. Speaker, this issue is complex and involves intergovernmental jurisdictional issues, legal requirements, and tax policies. Mr. Speaker, there is no easy or quick fix. We know the value of certain fishing licenses have increased dramatically in the past several years, Mr. Speaker, for a number of reasons. And many independent fishermen have trouble accessing capital. We also know this problem may get worse once DFO tightens up the owner-operator policy to curtail agreements. Trust agreements, rather. One option that has been suggested many times is to have our Fisheries Loan Board provide financing for licenses. Mr. Speaker, we have explored this in the past, and although it sounds simple, there are serious technicalities that must be addressed before we can consider this solution. Presently, Mr. Speaker, DFO issues licenses annually, so in theory, lenders have no technical security or collateral pledged for a loan. The license remains under the sole discretion of the Federal Minister of Fisheries, and the license must be reissued every year. And we all know any responsible lender requires solid security for large loans, and standard financial practices require this. Another aspect, Mr. Speaker, for the province to consider if we are to finance licenses is the amount of the capital for such a program. The potential amount of capital required could be enormous if we are to have a meaningful and an adequate program. Mr. Speaker, you cannot establish a program without consideration of the total financial commitment required. As well, it is fairly basic math to multiply thousands of licenses by hundreds of thousands of dollars each to see that we would require hundreds of millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, to fund such a program. Mr. Speaker, therefore, the approach to this issue must be multifaceted. As well, Mr. Speaker, we have known for many years that one of the problems with the intergenerational transfer is the capital gains tax exemption. Fishermen were experiencing a significant financial burden when they transferred their fishing licenses to a family member due to the capital gains tax. The Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture has worked hard over the past few years at senior levels to lobby and to work with the federal government to allow the transfer of assets within family without a large tax penalty. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in 2006, we were successful, and the Federal Income Tax Act has been changed to allow a $750,000 capital gains exemption for fishermen. Mr. Speaker, I would like to acknowledge and thank the MPs, Peter MacKay, Gerald Keddy, Bill Casey, for their active involvement in this issue. As well, Mr. Speaker, the provisions regarding employment insurance remain in place. This is a significant help for sons or daughters who are taking over from their parents. As I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, this is a complex problem. It involves federal government policy and legislation. As well, another aspect of this subject is the owner-operator policy. Fisheries and Oceans Canada recently put forward a proposal to address issues with the owner-operator policy. Various individuals and groups have provided feedback, and there are strong views on both sides. We believe, Mr. Speaker, in achieving a balanced approach to ensure that the diverse fisheries interests in Nova Scotia are addressed. Mr. Speaker, we are now awaiting the federal government to move ahead with implementing the changes. We have also forwarded recommendations that the owner-operator policy be strengthened for inshore fleets, but allow fleets to opt out if they do not presently operate successfully under the owner-operator model. Mr. Speaker, some examples include the full bay scallop fleet and the Scotia shelf shrimp fleet. We have also just suggested that there should be a reasonable time period, perhaps a minimum of 10 years, to allow investors to address their business interests and make changes to trust agreements. We are currently awaiting to see what comes forward from the Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, it is expected that the new owner-operator rules may allow our Provincial Fisheries Loan Board to have some legal security if a license holder defaults on their loans. A revised, flexible owner-operator policy, which we have strongly pushed for, will strengthen the inshore small boat sector and will ensure intergenerational transfer to our industry. I have, and officials from my department have discussed this issue with DFO on many occasions, and we believe DFO has a workable package ready to go. We continue to urge them to announce the changes on owner-operator so that we can all move forward. Finally, Mr. Speaker, there is another aspect to this topic, and that is the revised federal fisheries legislation. We believe, and a lot of people in the industry believe, it needs change. A new Fisheries Act will allow flexibility to issue licenses for longer terms. This, Mr. Speaker, will help intergenerational transfers, facilitate financing, and remove barriers that currently exist if we want to consider a loan program. There are many concerns about this act, but I think most are based on misunderstanding and or a lack of consultation. I think it would be good if the act can go to second reading so that these consultations can take place. Mr. Speaker, I am also trying right as we speak to get a meeting organized with Minister Hearn to discuss the act. And Mr. Speaker, I have requested that the critic for the Liberal Party as well as the NDP Party attend this meeting with me. Many people in the industry, Mr. Speaker, want the owner-operator issue fixed, and they don't see it in the new Fisheries Act. Again, we have been told by DFO that they should come forward with the new owner-operator policy, and that will remove some of the fears and the confusion related to the Act. So, Mr. Speaker, there are many changes happening relating to the fish licensing policy. When all of these required changes are in place, we may be in a position to consider a reasonable and a prudent loan program subject to our financial means. Mr. Speaker, we have been working hard on laying the groundwork for a long time, and we will continue to do so to serve the best interests of our fishing industry. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure for me to rise this evening as well, and I know we have a couple of minutes left just to chat about this, and I want to recognize the passion that the honourable member for Shelburne has. I know he's experienced the fishing industry for a number of years, and I also know that we've talked a lot about this in this House over the past while, and it's become an issue that's not going to go away anytime soon, I don't think, and we need to continue to work on it. And the idea of the members coming together to take this plight to Ottawa, to put up a good fight to make sure and ensure that we have this ongoing for many years to come is a great thing. It amazes me with the licensing issue, though, that we continue to have our sons and our daughters in the fishing industry want to continue on in this business when they've seen over the past number of years maybe things haven't been quite what they might like them to have been. But it's interesting to see that they want to carry that on. I guess it's what they know, and they have a love for it, just like some of us maybe a love for politics or a love for paramedicine or you name it. There's any number of topics out there, but it's a very unique job, and I know that some time ago we sat, and I think the honourable member was with us in that, that interesting meeting with presentation with Dr. Boris Worm there. I was totally amazed by what came out of that, and we saw so much about fishing. I don't know a lot about fishing, but I'm certainly learning a great deal. But that was a presentation that I probably could have sat through all day, and he went on about the draggers and so on, some of the findings that were found, and maybe how Department of Fisheries sort of agreed with some of the things that he was saying, not disputed them rather. And I think it's very important that this topic be kept in the forefront in this House and in this country, and certainly in this province. It goes without saying that it is an important issue, one of the highest priorities for us here in Nova Scotia, to maintain those jobs. I believe my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the previous speakers. I believe probably that we're in the same book, but I don't know if we're on the same page. But I'm glad this resolution was called. The Fisheries and Loan Board accept licenses as collateral for new entrants. A bill was in October of 2005. The former Minister of Fisheries, brought forth a bill to lift the cap on the amount of money that could be loaned to fishermen and independent fishermen, I should say. But it wasn't quite enough for me at the time, so I called for amendments to that bill, and we got the amendments. And the amendment was that fishing licenses owned by inshore owner-operators could have access to capital and use the license as collateral. And that was reinforced just this year by my colleague and member from Shelburne on Bill 27, I believe, that he put his bill in to reinforce the whole thing. So I was very glad of that. And anyway, the minister speaks about we cannot take these licenses yet because the feds do hold control of them. Well, the Bank of Canada, the Nova Scotia Bank of Canada, just kind of blew that one away with an incident down home where they took back a boat, and they took back the license with it that they called that license was being used for collateral, and the Royal Bank of Canada and the Nova Scotia Supreme Court agreed with the Royal Bank of Canada. Now I believe that may be going on a little farther to the Supreme Court of Canada, and I believe that the feds may be waiting for that. But there's always a but somewhere. And I believe if Bill C-45, the federal bill, fisheries bill, goes through, we may not have to worry about collateral. And I'll get into that a little bit later here. But this whole licensing thing was quite a thing to start with. And I want to go way back. I want to start way back and back about 40 years, I'd say. Maybe more. I'm 54, let's see. Yeah, back 42 years. I used to set my, I started fishing when I was 10 or 12 years old. When I was going to school, I'd get home at night off the bus, 4 o'clock, and I'd get down over the bank, down to the wharf, and shove my little boat afloat the month of December and go haul my traps every night. And I always could, since 10 years old I done that, and I could always earn enough money for Christmas to buy my 7 and 8 sisters and brothers something for Christmas, and I was very proud of that. So one night before Christmas, I was coming up the wharf with my bucket of lobsters, and I only had 8, 10, 12, 15 traps out, but I only had an hour to haul them. 4 o'clock I got home, 5 o'clock it was dark in December, so you couldn't haul too many traps by hand rowing, and 5 or 6 knot of tide in that passage, but I could get around pretty good. Anyway, I was coming up the wharf one night after dark with my bucket of lobsters, and I run into a feller named Herbie Cossaboom. He was our local fishery officer. So we sat down on the caps in there under dim light, and he says, "Junior, you got a lobster license? And I said, geez, Herb, no, I got no lobster license. He looked at me, he said, you should have a lobster license. So he pulled out this little pink booklet and wrote my name on it, and he said, here, that's 25 cents. I said, Herb, I haven't got 25 cents on me. So he patted me on the back and said, Merry Christmas. That's where my license come from. And I believe that the same thing was done to my father a year or two before that. Nobody even knew you need the license. So the whole thing after that was made, after they got everybody licensed up, they made it a limited entry, that you couldn't buy any more of these licenses. And so after that was all done, they had the right amount of people there. Remember, before this, we fished for, pretty near 400 years. I'm 15 generations on my father's side here since 1637. And this was back only 42 years ago that this started. And so 400 years we fished along all right. You know, you didn't need a license. What do you need a license for? You just, you was part of the ecosystem. I mean, that's the way it was around the coastal communities. So DFO and their great wisdom, this was the wisdom DFO had. Boy, we're going to make this a great fishery. We're going to manage this fishery. We're going to get everybody under wraps and get them licensed, and we'll make this limited entry. That's enough in it. We don't want no more in it. And so that's the way it went. In 1978, Romeo LeBlanc, matter of fact, was in Ottawa, and some of the fishermen then seen a wisdom of having an owner-operator. We can't let, we got to take care of these licenses, keep them, make sure what we do have in this limited entry, keep them in our communities and spread out. Because if we don't, we'll lose. I mean, somebody will come in and swoop them all up. And this was 30-some years ago. Somebody will come in and swoop them all up, and all these coastal communities will starve to death. So the wisdom was there then for the owner-operator to not let that happen. But then in 1999, when something not worse happened, but in I believe it was 99, the Marshall decision come down. And the Marshall decision had to be, the Supreme Court ordered that the Aboriginals had a right to fish. Well, I believe they always did have a right to fish, because there's been Aboriginals in the fishery for a long time. So this opened up a can of worms that DFO had to satisfy, to satisfy the Supreme Court. So they started paying big bucks for these limited entry licenses, and that triggered something for the big business out there. My God, these things must be worth something. The DFO's going to pay $400,000 or $500,000 for one of them little pink tags that Herbie gave me. This must be worth something. So in comes big business, along with DFO, trying to get her up, bidding against each other. First thing we know, these 25 cent or the free license I got, worth pretty near $1 million. Because with these DFO and big business trying to get it all, this is what happened. So now getting back to Bill C, I wish I had more time. I could tell you a lot more story. Back to Bill C-45. In Bill C-45, it's saying, the new act makes it clear that a license reflects a privilege to fish which does not convey any property rights to the license holder or anyone else. Furthermore, it confirms that a license is the property of the Crown and is not transferable, as was already stated in the fishery general regulations. So with that, with all this since 42 years ago, when Herbie gave me this license, it's come to the point where we believe what this document reads is a way that Herbie won't be giving any more licenses out, and I'm not sure, but I may not be able to give that license to my son or to my family to keep 15 generations is going on here, Mr. Speaker, of fishery, and we believe this document possibly could, unless it's clarified more, and like like the member of Shelburne said, we need this clarified from the member himself, from the minister himself who has signed on to this document. Because we are afraid that little pink slip that I had and 14, 12 generations before that didn't have to have, I believe that we could lose out big time in the coastal communities of Nova Scotia. And if that happens, if it's true, we've got to be sure that that's not true of what's in this document. And when we're sure of that, when we believe that we're sure of that that's not going to stop our children from continuing on to 16 and 20 and 28 generations, that's the day that I will sign on with them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, honourable members. The time for late debate has expired. The House shall resume itself back in the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
Order, please. The Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The Liberal Caucus has approximately 5 minutes left. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really have an intense set of questions for the minister, seeing that I only have a limited amount of time, and also seeing that I wasn't expecting to actually get up and ask the minister a question at this point in time. But seeing that our education critic has used up most of his time and had what he called an absolutely delightful discussion with the minister earlier on, they've covered mostly every aspect of education that you could possibly cover in the province. But I did want to ask the minister one question, Mr. Chair, and that is regarding the situation with the Halifax Regional School Board. As we all know, what happened earlier this year with the school board, and the fact that there is now just one person who is in charge of running things in terms of the regional school board setup. And I'm wondering if the minister could share with us, in her estimation, exactly what she thinks has been accomplished by what has happened and where she sees that heading in the future.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member opposite. Yes, indeed, there were some decisions and some changes with respect to the Halifax Regional School Board. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances, but I believe, as the Minister of Education, my priority is students in this province, and it seemed that the most appropriate action at the time to make sure that students did not suffer in any way, that the decision was made to appoint a one-person board to continue the board operations of that particular area until the municipal elections in 2008, November of 2008. School boards play a very important role in education in our province and are the link between the department and the schools. And they are elected boards. They do represent the interests of the communities in their area. And they do bring that community interest and that community voice to the board table. They work very closely with the board staff, senior staff, and they also work very closely with the department staff. And that's what I mean by the direct link between schools and the department. The responsibility of the boards, of course, is policy, and as a governance body, that is their focus. And looking at developing board policy that will guide the directions of the staff as they implement programs and initiatives in the board. In the situation that we had in Halifax County, there appeared to be some difficulty in having focus on students. And I'm proud to say that having appointed Mr. Windsor as the one-man board to carry us through to November of '08, at this point in time appears to be a very positive move for students and teachers and parents in the area. Mr. Windsor works very closely with the superintendent and senior staff at the board and is also in direct contact with my regional education officer and my deputy. And so the link there and the transition has been seamless, and information that we're receiving from parents and teachers is that it has not provided any disruption or had any negative impact on the students in our schools, and that has to be a priority for me as the minister. However, we recognize that going with a one-person board is a change, and we are continuing to monitor that and make sure that we are working to support that person, and again, to make sure that the work that he does not interfere with or have any negative impact. One of the things that was a concern is to make sure, for me, to make sure that the residents, the parents in the school communities in Halifax Regional Board had access to Mr. Windsor as the one-person board. And Mr. Windsor sat down with my deputy and the regional education officer to outline mechanisms for that consultation and that communication to be ongoing and to be effective. Agendas for the board meetings have a focus on students and on education, and parents have access to the board through those meetings. Also have opportunities to review the agenda prior to, and I think that gives them a feeling of involvement. They have an opportunity to add things to that agenda. They have an opportunity to question things on that agenda, and that opportunity for communication and consultation has remained positive and open. We will be watching that very closely because that's important that that be maintained. We are open to and ready for any concerns or questions that come from the community, and we will respond to those if and when they come. But it appears that it's been a very positive move, seamless move, and we will continue that through to the elections in November of '08.
Thank you. The honourable member's time has expired. The chair will now recognize the honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I want to start off this morning, first of all, saying to the minister, like some other speakers have already said, and certainly my experience with the minister to date, and I guess I will say it by that I've never hesitated to call the minister. And I want the minister to know, and I want all the members that are in the House, that as the member representing Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank, it's been very appreciated, the time you afforded me and the efforts that have come forth from you personally. Having said that, there's always having said that. I think there's been the odd time when there's been maybe mixed messages with the message that I get when I call the minister's office, and maybe that message that's coming sometimes from staff. And fortunately, the odd time that does happen, the minister has been very, very graceful and has cleared it up for me. I guess my first question, and I guess it's going to be a part one and a part two. And as a parent, having a child that's in high school, And what I've noticed is that when she comes home, I hear repeatedly, especially this time of the year, and I guess maybe because it is being April, students are beginning to look at the end of the academic year, and in a lot of cases planning for either the next year or the years after that. One of the things that I hear from my daughter when she comes home from school on a pretty regular basis is what she's going to do after she graduates from grade 12. And she always comments to me about the recruiters, if I can use the word recruiters, and I don't know if that's an appropriate term, but people that come into her school and promote Nova Scotia Community College. And so when we sit around the dinner table or just at home and she says so-and-so was in today promoting the community college and she's thinking of taking this and she's thinking of taking that. And I always wonder, because I spent 20 years as a faculty member and as a member of the admin group at Tallahassee University, and I said, well, doesn't anyone come in and talk to you about university? And she says, well, no. And so I'm left there, and her and I are having this discussion, I guess from my history is I'm promoting university because I'm trying to get a balance for her so that when the time comes for her to make up her mind, she'll have all the tools in her kit bag, and or all the clubs in the bag, if I want to put it that way. So it raises a question for me, and the first question, and this is part one of the question, the first question is that a trend in Nova Scotia where community colleges are being promoted in the high schools and a lot of emphasis not being placed on universities? So that's my first part of the question, and I'm going to go with part two of that question, because if that is the case, I'm wondering, is there a strategy in place that will remedy that? Because again, I know this is a wee bit of a reiteration, but I would like my child, and certainly all children of Nova Scotia, to know what options are available to them when it comes to education in this province. And I think what I'm requesting here is to see a fair balance in all higher education institutions be represented in a fair way when it comes to recruitment.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the member opposite. Before I begin the response, I want to acknowledge and confirm what the member has said about our ability to work together to resolve individual issues or concerns. And when the member would come to me with something, whether it was perhaps clarification of information from the department or whether it was a particular constituent who had an issue, we did work well together, and I think we were both interested in getting some resolution and moving forward so that the constituent was well served. So it was a mutual agreement to work towards a common goal, and we did that well. With respect to your daughter and the concerns about career options and what is available in the schools, I guess on the one hand, I'm pleased to hear that community college is being promoted in your school, because we talked about the role of community college, that it's growing, that the profile of the college has changed, and we want to make sure that our students are well aware of the course offerings that exist in those campuses around the province. Having said that, that should not be at the detriment of information about our other universities and colleges. And we do have a very fine group of colleges and universities in our province with a high quality of education, a high standard, and the community college, as I said, supplements that and bridges the gap between high school and university and workforce. The career fairs and career days that are held at schools are organized at the local level, whether it be at the board level or whether at the school level. And I would, certainly hope that those who are organizing those days do invite all of the universities to have representation, and to attend those career days and those job fairs. To directly answer your question, there is absolutely no trend out of the department to promote one over the other. They're all considered to be post-secondary. They all are considered to be opportunities and options for our grade 12 students when they graduate. And I would certainly want to make sure that schools do include all other learning institutions when they are offering job fairs or when they're having information that's passed out to their graduates, whether it's the calendars from the different universities or whether it's having representatives from the universities come in to talk, to recruit students. There needs to be, in my opinion, a fair opportunity for all students to get all of the information. But it is organized by the school and at the board, or by the board at the school level, and the province at this point has not participated in organizing those. If there's anything we can do to encourage boards and schools to be all-inclusive in that, I'd be glad to do what I can.
Thank you. The honourable member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'd like to go, and I heard my colleague talk about earlier about suspensions, and he got me thinking. And one of the things that I always wondered is when it comes to suspensions, even including, I guess, what I would term as in-school suspensions, in-school and out-of-school suspensions. I'm curious as to if the Department of Education has any demographics on the students that are suspended. Does the department or the school itself do some sort of analysis? Is there a demographic profile with respect to suspensions, either out or in-school suspensions, that is available to members of the House? Do we know not just the reasons why our students are getting suspended, but I'm looking for more in-depth analysis with respect to breakdowns of gender, maybe a social background, income, and that type of thing.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the member opposite, I did speak earlier about our student information system, which would collect the data from all of the schools up through the boards into a centralized database. And I'm not sure if the member was here, but I will repeat that to simply say that that is a $10 million project. At this point in time, we have not invested money in it this year, recognizing that any dollars that we had, we wanted to put them into the classroom if we could. However, we do know that schools keep a record of all of the data that's there, including suspensions, reason for suspension, and those kinds of things. And then that's available to the board, and also we can access that if we wish. One of the initiatives that we have in our schools now is the PEBS program, and the PEBS program certainly does have a mechanism to track the behaviors of students, the frequency of inappropriate behaviors, the outcomes and the consequences of inappropriate behaviors, and their information has come back to us to say that those schools that have implemented the PEBS program are seeing about a 50% reduction in the number of students who are called to the office for inappropriate behavior. So there are ways to capture and record that. At this point in time, it's at the school level and the board level. To answer your question about demographics and what role demographics might play in that, again, that would be something that an analysis of that at the board level could certainly identify some of those concerns that you've expressed. You know, is there a correlation to socioeconomic status? Is there a correlation to gender and age and grade? But that, again, is at this point in time board and school level. When our systems information system is fully implemented across the province, then we will be able to access that information and do some collective analysis of all across the board, all across the province.
Thank you. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next thing I want to bring up, and it's probably more related to the riding of Waverley Fall River Beaverbank. It's certainly not a general question, but and I think I probably gave you a little bit of heads up last week during question period. You probably knew that this was going to be coming at some point in time. But I get a wee bit concerned, and I need to have some assurance that that my concerns aren't valid or they can be laid to rest. Especially when I hear a good member from Cape Breton bring up quite frequently a school or the lack of a school in Cape Breton, and I know that LC Skerry and Waverley Memorial are being slated for replacement schools in a couple years down the road. And as I go about and talk to voters who call or that are moving into the area, or even in those that currently live in the riding, who talk about a replacement school, and I want to be able to say to them with confidence, and I want to feel safe and secure that I'm giving them the right information, because they're basing life decisions on whether they're going to move into a certain area or not. So I'd like to ask through you, Mr. Chair, how concrete, how definite is the replacement of LC Skerry and Waverley Memorial?
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, to the member opposite, I'm sure you've heard me say many times in the House in the last week or so that this government in 2003 accepted a report from the Capital Construction Committee. That report had 12 new schools and 45 renovations, additions projects on it. And the commitment of the province was to deliver on that as it was presented. That commitment has not changed. We recognize that some of the projects have not been delivered on the timeline that was announced at that time, and there are a number of situations and factors that have contributed to that. One of those, of course, is the escalating cost of materials and the $2,003 that were used when the project was announced and a dollar figure attached to the scope of work that was to be done. Those figures have changed and escalated significantly, and we're now talking $2,007, and it's a significant increase. That has caused us to delay the delivery of some of those projects, and as I said, you've heard me say that many times over the last week. That has not changed the list that was approved, and the school in Waverley Fall River is on that list, and it's scheduled to move into the design process next year. And usually we have a design process, and then we go to construction tender and construction. So it is delayed. It's pushed out from the original announcement, but it is on the list, and there's a commitment to deliver all of those schools that are on that list.
Thank you. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in 1994, there was a report, the BLAC report was tabled in 1994. And as of this date, all of the recommendations of that report have not been fully completed. I know that it is 13 years, so I guess my first question through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister is, I know there are a number of recommendations that remain outstanding on that report. I'd like to know how many there are outstanding and what the time what the timeline is. I think I heard in the budget report that they were going to be included in this fiscal year, but I would just like to have that confirmed. And I would also, I guess, piggyback another question onto that, since it has been 13 years since that report was first tabled, and I would hope, and I guess I would request some sort of assurance that the outstanding recommendations are still relevant today as far as the black learners are concerned.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, through to the member opposite. It is true that the Black Report was prepared 13 years ago. This government made a commitment of $1.6 million this year, and that is the final commitment of a 4-year plan over 3 years, I guess, a 3-year plan of $4.1 million. And that $4.1 million was a commitment to move forward with the implementation of the recommendations in the Black Report. I have had staff provide for me a list of all of the recommendations in that report and a status of all of them. And I'm pleased to be able to share that with you because I think it answers your questions directly. 16 of those recommendations, as they were printed, have been implemented. 9 of those have partially been implemented, the initial stages of implementation, and 5 have not yet been addressed. And I have met with the case, and we have talked about the implementation of those recommendations, and I made a commitment to them that it's time to go back and have a look at the ones that we have implemented, how successful that implementation has been, have things changed over the 13 years, are there things that we need to do differently with those recommendations, and then look at the ones that have not been implemented and what is the plan for those. So that commitment was made to CASE probably 6 to 8 weeks ago when I met with them, and that is our move forward strategy there. The report was a valuable report. It was intended to have positive outcomes, and what we need to check to see is if the implementation is translated into those positive outcomes. And the same with any review that I call for. If it is achieving the outcomes, we continue. If it's not, we modify it or change it or discontinue. So I hope that answers the question for the member. A couple of things out of that I think are really progressive is that we are currently piloting an English 12 African Heritage Language Arts program course this year at our high schools. That's a new course, and that is a direct result of the Black Report. We have the transition class at Nova Scotia Community College. That's new this year, and that again is an effort to respond to the recommendations so that we can provide programs and structures for the population identified in that report. So I am prepared to add additional information if it's required, but that's the status at this point.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaver Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just, I guess, piggyback on some of the comments from the Minister, and I will say this, is that in 2007, and this may sound like a wee bit of a contradiction, and I hope that it's going to make some sense. But I want to say this. I congratulate the Department of Education, and particularly with respect to the Nova Scotia Community College, for the implementation of the transition the transition program at Community College. However, this is where the contradiction is that even though I congratulate the department for doing this, I have to say, and I want to make this clear, that to me it's a shame that in 2007 we have to implement a transition program. Our goal should be to rid the province of transition, the need for transition year programs or transition programs. So I guess there wasn't a question there, but I just wanted to make that statement. I want to, when you talk about the Black report and the recommendations and the update, and I'm assuming that this is, I think what I heard was 6 or 8 weeks ago. And if you could just say yes or no very, very quickly, it would be appreciated to that one.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
I can give you the exact date when I met with them. I don't have that exact date at my fingertips right now, but it would have been. I'm going to get you the date, Mr. Chair. I'll get that date for the member.
Thank you. The honourable member has approximately half a minute left.
Half a minute. Well, half a minute left.
Today.
Well, there were other things I wanted to talk to you about, to the minister about through the chair. And I think during QP last week, I have a real concern with the fact we've got high schools we've got a high school within my particular riding that's facing overcrowding. And I've got a real concern there with the grade 9s attending high school, and it goes beyond just the and it goes just beyond that. And I've just been told now it's time, and I would like to make the recommendation that we adjourn debate.
Thank you. The time allotted for debate in Committee on Supply has now expired. The Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee now rise and report progress and beg leave to sit again on a future day.
Thank you. Order, please. The committee reports.
The committee's made progress and begs leave to sit again.
Thank you. Great. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
I'd like to call the Bill 158 Financial Measures Act.
Bill number 158, the Financial Measures Act. The Honourable the Minister of Finance to close debate on Bill number 158.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise to close debate on the Financial Measures Act. I appreciate all the comments made by honourable members, and while there may be a number of them that I don't entirely agree with, I do appreciate the discussion on the bill, and of course the importance of this bill as part of our budget. And with that, I would close debate and move second reading.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 158. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 158, entitled an act respecting certain financial measures.
Thank you. Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill 168, Motor Vehicle Act.
Bill number 168, the Motor Vehicle Act. The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be now read for the second time. Mr. Speaker, the principle that's involved in this bill is related to the graduated licensing system that we have in the province of Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia has been a pioneer in this regard within Canada. And being a pioneer and being one of the first to bring forward such legislation eventually puts you in the situation where other jurisdictions catch up, other jurisdictions come in with more up-to-date measures in a graduated licensing system. So as we come forward with this piece of legislation, it is one that will again put us in the forefront, but currently there is a need for us to move forward and to enhance the measures of the graduated licensing system. The enhancement that is contained within this bill, Mr. Speaker, is one which embodies the principle that experience behind the wheel is the best teacher for newly licensed drivers and beginning drivers. And that principle is addressed in the bill by extending the period and the time in which newly licensed drivers must spend behind the wheel of a vehicle so that they can experience all of the seasons that are in the province of Nova Scotia and hopefully learn from that experience as a result of their driving activities while a beginning licensed driver within the province. We have also, Mr. Speaker, addressed the need for more focus to be placed by the drivers that are the fully licensed drivers accompanying beginning drivers, that is those who are the supervising drivers. And we have required that these individuals be fully licensed with a year's experience, so that under the measures of this legislation, you would have to attain at least the age of 20 years before you could find yourself in a supervising position with respect to a beginner's licensed driver trying to move on to the next stage. We have also, Mr. Speaker, put in place measures that would prohibit supervising drivers from being under the influence of alcohol, and that would require them to have a blood alcohol content of less than 0.05%. Now, I know that some members feel that that should be zero. Unfortunately, the legal people suggest to us that we would expose ourselves to charter challenges by using zero in that circumstance because of existing law that applies elsewhere. So we have put that in effect, Mr. Speaker. We have also put in place a measure whereby a newly licensed driver for a period of 5 years in this province cannot exceed 0 blood alcohol content. And that, Mr. Speaker, will ensure that that these drivers who are driving for the first 5 years are not going to go out and get themselves in a situation where they would be under the influence, and hopefully after 5 years they will have established a pattern for themselves that will last for a lifetime. Distraction of young drivers is a concern that is addressed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, and that distraction sometimes comes about as a result of additional passengers being in the vehicle, and sometimes peer pressure is such that when you have a group of people who are of the age of newly licensed drivers may become a bit excited and want to experience a little faster movement than should be exhibited by a newly licensed driver. And so we want to ensure that they are not exposed to that sort of influence. and we're saying that there can only be one, in this legislation is proposed that there can only be one additional driver in the vehicle with a newly licensed driver unless there is a supervising driver present, and then the seat belts could be filled up in that circumstance. Or if it's a family member, and the family will be spelled out in the regulations, and that would enable the driver to be able to transport family members where appropriate. So, Mr. Speaker, those are the main principles that are contained in the bill. Fundamentally, it is a bill which is intended to provide greater experience, which is intended to remove distractions from young drivers, which is intended to establish good habits for young drivers with respect to their attitude toward the use of alcohol and motor vehicles, and also to ensure that that the supervising drivers are not abusing the situation with respect to newly licensed drivers and using them as designated drivers for the purpose of being transported around. Those are the main tenets of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to have introduced it and to have moved the second reading of this bill, and look forward to the debate as the bill moves forward to the various stages of the legislative process.
Thank you. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have a few minutes here tonight to be able to speak on Bill number 168, as introduced by the Minister of Transportation. You know, certainly overall pleased to see this legislation come forward, and it's got a number of changes certainly identified that will be a safety factor and help young drivers and new drivers. It could be, I suppose, of any age. It's we often refer to as new drivers as young drivers, but really anybody that's getting their license for the first time is a new driver. I must give credit, maybe perhaps where credit is due, Mr. Speaker, certainly to the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the organization known as MAD, have had a strong influence on this legislation. I know they've come to the government caucus, they've come to our caucus, and the caucus of the third party, I'm sure, to lobby and push for changes and improvements to this type of legislation that's needed in Nova Scotia. And as we know, Nova Scotia has had a rather dismal record on the scorecard, I guess, for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, one of the lower in the country, and hopefully with legislation like this, it will bring up our status, our standing in the country, and this is a step in the right direction. I just want to take a couple of minutes, Mr. Speaker, to look at some of the changes that are proposed here in the legislation, and you know, generally some positive things, but also so I have a couple questions on some of the elements that are proposed. The idea that the learner stage would go from 6 months to 12 months is probably a good thing. It gives people, new drivers, a chance to adjust to what will be expected of them, and they're still eligible to get a 3-month discount, I guess you would call it, if they take a driver education training. So instead of being after 3 months, it would, under the new legislation now, it would be under 9 months. And so that's probably a good thing. And then after they're ready, I guess the next step is to go for the road test, and as it is now. But there's also a new element that's been added here, both at the learner stage and at the newly licensed stage, and that's something that's called a competency test. And I understand the regulations around that will be drawn up by Cabinet or under the Regulation Act, but it leaves some questions, I guess, as to what what will be included in that competency test. And I guess my first question is around who is it that will determine whether a driver is competent or not? Will it be somebody in the Registry of Motor Vehicles? Will it be somebody within the Department of Transportation? Will it be a medical practitioner? These are unknowns, and and also, secondly, what is in the competency test? How will you determine if a person is competent? Is it you know, is it based on their mental agility? Is it based on their physical activity behind the wheel? Or there's just some unknown questions here about what is meant by being competent, and who will actually administer that test, or who will determine whether somebody is competent or not. So that's an issue, Mr. Speaker, that certainly is an unknown element, and that we have some questions around. I know from past experience, occasionally senior drivers in particular are sometimes asked to take a further test. You know, perhaps their doctor recommends that for some reason, or a family member is questioning their ability to drive, and they're asked to take a test of some type. I had one experience with a senior individual that at 70 years of age, not really that old, but was asked to get retested, and he thought it would be simply a matter of going to the Department of Motor Vehicles station and taking a driver's test, but not so. He had to go through a very elaborate, I guess you might call it a competency test. He was referred to a private company called Drive Able, and they're a company out of Alberta that has an office here in Nova Scotia, and it was a computer-generated program that was quite difficult for him, and not being used to computers, he failed the test. He was tested on the road, and he was found to be okay, but he failed that aspect of that part of the competency test. So like I said, there's some questions around that aspect of the whole issue. Another aspect, Mr. Speaker, that is a little bit disconcerting is around a supervising driver. As the minister mentioned, a newly licensed driver will have to have the supervising driver with them for a period of time. And one of the requirements is that they must sit in the front seat of the vehicle. That seems like a logical thing to do. And secondly, they're not allowed to, or they're allowed to have alcohol up to a level of 0.05%. And perhaps I might have a little bit of issue with that particular aspect of the law, because while I realize there may be some legal complications here, but really the job of the supervising driver is to supervise that newly licensed driver, make sure they're not going over the speed limit, make sure they're watching the traffic, putting their blinker on, all the things that a good driver should be doing. You know, and if the driver is under some measure of influence, then are they able to do their job and supervise that newly licensed driver? And are they setting a good example by doing that? That's my question. So I guess there's some concerns with that area. And finally, I guess, Mr. Speaker, if there's another issue here, is that in the particular bill, it doesn't mention any time for proclaiming the act into law. It simply states that you know, it'll be at the Governor and Council will have declare it by proclamation, but there's no particular date, so it doesn't come into force until Cabinet decides it might so wish. And as we know from past experience, there's many bills that have not been proclaimed into law, and I think it would be much better if there was a date in there proclaiming when it would happen. So with those few concerns, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my seat and look forward to seeing the bill go on to the next stage in the law amendments, and I guess looking forward to what other people may have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member from Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand and speak on this bill, number 168, on behalf of our transportation critic in the Liberal caucus, the honourable and capable member for Clare. Mr. Speaker, the bill is about amending the graduated driver's licensing program, and just for those who wouldn't have memory of how the graduated driver's licensing program came about, it was actually back in 1994, in October of 1994, that the program was introduced by a former Liberal transportation minister. Mr. Speaker, and I think if I'm correct in my memory, it was championed at the time by Dr. Jack Yazer from Sydney, who was a huge, I guess, proponent of the driver's licensing program, but also lobbied government very hard in those days to go ahead and institute such a program. And we know that it made sense, and we know that times change, and over time the amendments are required to such an act. And Mr. Speaker, as we know, this program is our new drivers learning how to drive. Many of our young people in this province have gone through the current driver's licensing program over the years, and since that time, overall, the number of crashes have decreased by 37% that was just during the first 3 years of the program. Now, Mr. Speaker, like any programs, as I said, there's always room for improvements in making them better, and the amendments that are being proposed by the minister will help make this program a better program. And the minister has talked about the proposed amendments, including the zero blood alcohol content level for all drivers will be less than 5 years, the driving experience, and also extending the beginner's learner stage from 6 months to 12 months so that new drivers can gain important driving experience and especially driving in all seasons. It's a welcomed amendment, I would say, Mr. Speaker. It's not welcomed by all. I can tell you very clearly that my teenage daughter has told me to vote against this because of that one amendment itself. But I'm taking her objections under consideration, and I will. I told her I'd raise it in the House, and I've done so. And I've done my duty as a father, Mr. Speaker, and now I'll do my duty as a legislator, Mr. Speaker. But we know experience is necessary, and experience is especially useful during driving in all seasons, Mr. Speaker. We know that extra experience will be very useful to our teenage drivers. And another amendment includes tougher passenger restrictions for new drivers as well, Mr. Speaker. Anything, in the opinion of the Liberal caucus, anything that increases safety and awareness of new drivers is always welcomed. And Mr. Speaker, our caucus is in favor of these measures that are being introduced by the minister. And having said that, we're in agreement with this moving on to a further stage of debate, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Minister of Transportation and Public Works to close debate on Bill 168.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from members who have spoken on this debate. And I did in my opening of the debate did not reference the competency test, and I can say that will be a combination of computer program testing and personal evaluation that will be conducted through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And I appreciate the dilemma the honourable member for Glace Bay faces, and reminds me of the story of the young man as he approached 22 and 23 years of age was known to have said, "It's amazing how much my father has advanced in his views in recent years." So hopefully the honourable member will have a similar experience with his daughter, and she will eventually see the wisdom of legislation such as this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I moved it at the start.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 168. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 168, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 293 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Motor Vehicle Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill 163, Human Rights Act.
Bill number 163, the Human Rights Act. The Honourable, the Minister of Environment and Labour.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Sorry for jumping ahead of the gun there. I want to also thank my colleagues, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Seniors, both are whom over in law amendments right now doing duty on behalf of the citizens of the province of Nova Scotia. I want to thank them for their support in this bill. This is a bill that's brought forward basically as a labor bill to help allow workers who want to continue to work beyond the mandatory retirement age to have that option and freedom to do so. It touches on human rights because it amends the Human Rights Act, but also upon seniors, and that's why Ms. Bolivar-Getson, the Honourable Carolyn Bolivar-Getson was there in support, because seniors should have, the Honourable Minister of Seniors. The member from Lunenburg West, the Honourable Minister of Immigration, the Minister in charge of the Public Service Commission, Human Resources, Emergency Measures Organization. I think we have now pinned down the person who I wanted to refer to without using her name. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, many seniors want to contribute their expertise in the job force beyond the mandatory age of retirement. Others do not, and I want to make it very clear that this bill in no way forces anyone to work beyond the age that they want to retire. It doesn't affect pension arrangements in any way. What it simply does is allow seniors, allow people who are 65 to continue working if they so choose to do so. Others may opt to retire at earlier ages and contribute to society through volunteer activities, but that is their choice, and this bill then allows them that choice. In 2004, I believe it was, Mr. Speaker, we gave this option to civil servants, and it's only fair that we extend this option to other people. I also have some good news, Mr. Speaker, that with this bill, we now have the possibility of enticing Ron Russell back into the legislature. And anyway, with that tongue-in-cheek at the end, I move second reading of the bill, an act respecting the elimination of mandatory retirement.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to stand and say a few words on behalf of the NDP caucus with respect to this Bill 163. Mr. Speaker, eliminating discrimination on the basis of age around employment is always a good idea, I think, Mr. Speaker. But I think we have to be cautious and not overstate the effect of this bill and what's occurring here. It's interesting, I've had discussions with not very many people, but a few people have sent emails and made some calls around this, this particular bill. And there's a misconception in the public, and I think it's important that we try to dispel this myth, that there somehow was a law in the province of Nova Scotia that mandated retirement at 65, that made it mandatory that people had to retire at 65. And let's be clear about that, Mr. Speaker. No such law exists on the books in this province. There is no mandatory retirement law. Mr. Speaker, not so many years ago, a former assistant deputy minister from the province of Nova Scotia retired from that position, and a few weeks after, I was at the Price Club. And lo and behold, here was this person working at the Price Club. And I had a chance to stop and chat with him, and he said, you know, I was so fearful of being bored to death. I raced right out and I found somebody who would hire me, and he was so pleased. to be in a situation where he could continue on, especially in a role where he was meeting many members of the public. And he certainly was beyond retirement age, 65. And there's nothing to prohibit any employers in the province of Nova Scotia right now, before this bill passes, with the exception of those workplaces that have collective agreements that mandate and require retirement at 65. So essentially, there is no law in the province of Nova Scotia today that mandates, that makes it mandatory for retirement at 65. And Mr. Speaker, you will probably know that there's a history to these practices, a history in the case of mandatory retirement that goes back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it will probably come as a surprise to some members that mandatory retirement didn't come about as a means to regulate the labor market in terms of bringing new workers in and getting older workers out and making opportunities for new workers, which is often how we think about it today. In fact, mandatory retirement came about because of financial pressures that employers felt and wanted to have a way to deal with. You know, Henry Ford found that it was a lot less expensive to pay a new, inexperienced worker in his factory than a worker who had been there for many, many years and had become highly skilled and experienced and had gone up through the wage scales. And so mandatory retirement was really a practice that became institutionalized as a way to lower the labor costs that employers faced in their workplace. And over time, the age of 65 was quite often the age at which workers were pushed out of those workplaces, and the labor costs of the replacement workers coming in was much lower. And that really, those are the origins. And then it was from that position that we got pensions, because you had all of these workers who were no longer with an income, and they saw that their experience wasn't being valued, and they were in a situation quite often impoverished in their old age, and they often organized in those factories. They got collective agreements. The collective agreements institutionalized the practice of mandatory retirement at 65, but it established pension plans. And so that's where the connection between mandatory retirement, the age of 65, and the pension system that we have both in private industry and then in the public domain, really that's where the origins are. So this practice is truly a very it's a very long and ingrained practice, and it had a rationale to it. Well, Mr. Speaker, today we are certainly a long way from the days of Henry Ford and the manufacturing sector. And Mr. Speaker, as they say, 50 is the new 40, and I would like to agree with that particular sentiment, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's not unreasonable to think that there would be some people, perhaps in our province, who would choose to remain in the labor force beyond the age of 65. Although, Mr. Speaker, I understand that in the provinces that have adopted legislation similar to this bill, the take-up is very, very small. It's something like 2% of people, in fact, want to stay beyond 65. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, the trend, in fact, is to retire earlier than 65, particularly for people who are in a financial position to do this. But also, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, there are many members of our society who have to retire before 65 because of disability and illness. And certainly in the province of Nova Scotia, we have one of the largest proportion of recipients of CPP disability, people who are in the workforce but who have had to retire on disability of any other province in the country. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an area of law that has much complexity. Now, so having said that, what this bill does is it allows employers, though, to continue mandatory retirement policies where they can establish that there's a bona fide reason for that. And this may, in fact, be due to the physical requirements of a job. I think the minister made mention in his briefing of firefighters or police officers, people whose occupations have particular physical requirements. So, but I understand that these decisions will be made by the Human Rights Commission, probably on a case-by-case basis. I have some concern about this, given the length of time it takes for the Human Rights Commission, given their resources and given their other responsibilities. I'm not sure that we can burden the Human Rights Commission with a new set of responsibilities unless we allocate the appropriate resources and we ensure that it isn't a long and protracted process for individual workers to establish whether or not the exemption provisions of this particular bill would apply or not. Mr. Speaker, we also, I think, need to think and reflect carefully on the impact of more workers staying in the labor force for longer periods, what that might have in situations where there are pension schemes. And I know the minister has said that this that there will be no change in the requirements of those schemes in terms of the eligibility for pension benefits. But I think, Mr. Speaker, this is one that we will watch very carefully. We would not be happy, I think, if we saw the age of retirement creep higher and higher, and we would see eligibility for pension benefits start to follow that, meaning that workers who chose to retire at 65, that somehow their entitlement to pension benefits at 65 would be affected in any way. And I think we'll only know how this bill will impact those pressures as the bill comes into law. There is a date on this bill for proclamation, which is a year from its passage, which is, Mr. Speaker, it gives some lead time to the employers in the province to prepare their workplaces for any possible impact. I think those are the remarks pretty much that I wanted to make with respect to this bill. I know that in the university community that I come out of in terms of faculty associations, there has always been a very heated debate about whether or not mandatory retirement should or should not be a feature of the employment practices at the universities. And I know universities aren't the only settings where such a debate has gone on. They've gone on in the teaching profession. And this bill will not eliminate that debate. This bill leaves those collective agreements in place with the mandatory retirement provisions, and any change in those settings will come about through collective bargaining, as I understand what the minister has said. So let's not overstate what this bill does. The bill doesn't repeal a piece of legislation requiring mandatory retirement. There's no such legislation. What it does is it prohibits discrimination on the basis of age unless there's a bona fide reason required in the job for a particular age requirement. And to the extent that it will provide choice to more working people in the province to remain in the labor force longer, then, Mr. Speaker, this is certainly something that we can support, and we would be looking forward to the interventions of the public at the law amendments process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise this evening and speak on second reading of Bill number 163, an act respecting the elimination of mandatory retirement. Mr. Speaker, while I note that this was a bill introduced by the Minister of Environment and Labour, we all know that a similar piece of legislation was previously introduced by my good friend and colleague, the member from Kings West, who brought this issue first to the floor of this House, expressing concern that had been brought to his attention from teachers in his school board, who were notified that while some school boards in this province allowed teachers to work past the age of 65, the Valley School Board, in fact, had a prohibition on allowing that to take place. So I want to commend my colleague from Kings West for having brought the concern of a constituent to the floor of this House. And because of those concerns, while there is a bill from our party in front of the House, it's good to see that the government has listened to the concerns from the member from Kings West and has brought in legislation basically to achieve the same result. Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that we want to make sure, if we're going to talk about the elimination of discrimination on various different aspects, it's important that age be included in that as well. But, Mr. Speaker, it's important as well that while we recognize that there are Nova Scotians who wish to continue to work beyond the age of 65, it's important that we as legislators also realize that many of those who wish to work beyond the age of 65 is not just because of a desire to work, it's because of a necessity to work. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, coming from the riding of Richmond, that when I meet with some of the seniors in my riding, and I know of these seniors, I know of their family, I know of the fact that many of them, in my case, have worked, for example, at the fish plant for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years in some cases. And, Mr. Speaker, it saddens me to know that these people are living on the Canada pension, the old age, and the supplement. And I would dare say that about 80% of my constituents who are retired are receiving the supplement. Now, to receive the supplement, it means that the federal government is giving you additional money to bring you to a basic level of income, which I would say is barely above the poverty line. Now, Mr. Speaker, to know that people who have worked their entire lives are receiving a supplement to bring them to a basic level of income is something that should be of great concern to all Nova Scotians, but certainly to us as legislators here in this province. Too many of our residents are retiring after working their entire life with absolutely no private pension plan. They are at the mercy of the state to receive their income, to be able to maintain their homes, maintain their vehicles, and maintain a quality of life. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I have the utmost respect for my constituents, because when they come in and they show me their Revenue Canada statement, their notice of assessment, and I see what their yearly income is, it baffles me how these people can maintain a home, maintain a vehicle, and maintain any quality of life, knowing that the cost of energy goes up, the cost of insurance is up, the cost of gas is up, and the cost of living is up. And yet they see increases of 1% or 2% per year on their pensions. Mr. Speaker, so again, I would hope that this bill would at the same time allow us to reflect upon the fact, and when I think of here in Nova Scotia, our government has provided generous assistance to a number of companies that have located in this province. And I'm wondering at this point if we shouldn't be saying as a province that if we're going to provide employers with payroll rebates or we're going to provide them with assistance, should we not at least also ask those companies to make sure that they are providing pension benefits to their employees at the same time if they are going to receive the assistance of the province of Nova Scotia? Working past 65, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, from some of my constituents will be a necessity. Because if they are going to have their independence, if they're going to maintain their own homes, maintain their own vehicle and any quality of life, they will have to work past 65. Mr. Speaker, I would submit to you that people who have private pension plans are not the ones who will ask to work past 65. They will have security in their old age. But many of our residents who've worked their entire lives, raised their families, been community leaders, volunteers in our community, may be forced. Because I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I have constituents who have taken early retirement packages only to find out within 3 or 4 years they can't live off of what their pensions are bringing them in. And now they're looking for employment again at an age where they should be enjoying their retirement. They should be enjoying their children, their grandchildren. Instead, now they're looking for new employment opportunities because of the fact they can't make ends meet. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I do hope that the Minister of Environment and Labour, through his staff and through the government, will reflect upon this legislation, not only in the fact that we should allow Nova Scotians who wish to work beyond 65 the ability to do so, but also recognize why is it that some of Nova Scotians have to work past the age of 65 because of the fact that they do not have private pension plans. Mr. Speaker, on that same topic, we should also be looking as a government and as members of the legislature as to how many of our employers are still maintaining defined benefit pension plans in this province. Now, Mr. Speaker, defined benefit means that you pay into a pension plan, the employer pays in, and when you retire, you have a set amount that you're going to receive as a pension plan. Fewer and fewer employers are providing that benefit, Mr. Speaker. It's now come down to a defined contribution pension plan. Now, what that means, Mr. Speaker, is that you pay in a certain amount of your salary, and many of the employers, it's either 4% or 6% of your salary. The employer matches it, it goes into an RRSP, and you decide where you want to invest that RRSP, and depending on what success you've achieved on that, that is what's going to determine what you have as a retirement benefit. And Mr. Speaker, we know the risks involved with that. We've seen how the markets have in the past been very generous to people who've invested in RRSPs, but we've also seen how many people have lost a great deal of their investments when the markets have gone down. And you have to question, at the end of the day, what will they have left for a pension benefit when they retire, when there is no guarantees. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, more and more employers are moving away from defined benefit to defined contribution, and only in the number of years to come will we see the true consequences of moving to that and what impact it will have on workers retiring in this province. So with that, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, I'm pleased to see that the concerns raised by our colleague from the Liberal caucus from Kings West brought first to this floor is being taken seriously by the government, but I do hope that this will give an opportunity for the government and all legislatures to reflect on exactly what can we do to make sure that Nova Scotians who've worked their entire lives can retire in financial security and be able to maintain their own homes, their own vehicles, and their sense of independence and continue to be contributing members to our society. And until we start having that discussion, Mr. Speaker, too many people will continue to retire after working their entire life and rely upon the supplement for a basic level of income, which is an injustice and something that we should not allow to continue when we look at the fact that we're now in 2007. With that, Mr. Speaker, our caucus will certainly be supporting this bill moving to second reading and moving on to law amendments to see what additional comments we might receive at that stage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour to close debate on Bill 163.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the comments made by the members opposite. Quite interested in the comments made by Halifax Needham on the history of labour law and labour rights. We often take for granted many of the labour rights we have. and so thank you for the interventions opposite. And with that, I close debate.
The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 163. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 163, entitled an act respecting the elimination of mandatory retirement.
Thank you. Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable, the Deputy Government Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill 166, Undersea Coal Mines Regulation Act.
Bill number 166, Undersea Coal Mines Regulation Act. The Honourable, the Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to move second reading of Bill 166, an act to facilitate the effective regulation of undersea coal mines in the province. Mr. Speaker, what this will do is clarify or help to clarify occupational health and safety jurisdictions, as the federal government will hope are agreed to mirror our legislation and our occupational health and safety regulations. We're very proud of the occupational health and safety regulations we have in the province. Mr. Speaker, as a result of Westray, out of bad comes good, and we now have some of the most modern and vigorous occupational health and safety regulations in any jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker, and that's been recognized in many different ways. And so, by eliminating the confusion over who would protect these workers, we hope to protect them better. And so, with those few words of introduction, I'm happy to move second reading.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will be supporting this bill. Moving on to law amendments. Just a few short statements on it. Yes, this bill was born out of Westray, and the fact that you know, it is a good thing if we have proper inspectors with the right legislation in this province inspecting our mines, and we know that this is in particular in relation to the Donkin enterprise, that what we need is people that are local people that know that coal field, that are be there to inspect these mines, inspect them in a timely manner, and that the province should have control of them rather than Ottawa. And the fact that we would hope that would be reflected of the years of work of people on the committee that drew up these amendments, that they be followed through on them. People such as Angus Grant from the CAW and Huey MacArthur from UMW of America, and that these people be listened to, that these laws be enforced in the very strictest of ways, so that we never have another lost life in coal mining in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, we will be supporting this bill. Moving on to law amendments.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleased to rise and say just a few brief words concerning Bill number 166. Of course, we too will be supporting this bill moving on to law amendments because, of course, as the two previous speakers have said, it makes perfect sense, and we have to stay on guard in terms of regulations and laws that are enforced. And as the other speakers mentioned, this came about from Westray. Having grown up in a coal mining town, Mr. Speaker, we know the dangers that are faced by coal miners, and we know that safety is paramount to coal miners, Mr. Speaker. We know that we know what can happen. We know what has happened over the years, and we know that if anything, we have to pay particular and special attention to the regulations and the safety regulations that go along with coal mining. The Donkin enterprise, Mr. Speaker, as the Minister well knows, and the member for Cape Breton Centre well knows, the Donkin enterprise will give us another chance to revive the coal mining industry in Cape Breton. We have the technology that exists nowadays to burn coal cleanly, Mr. Speaker, and we have an opportunity here to employ hundreds of people in Cape Breton. We have an experienced workforce in Cape Breton in the coal mining industry, and I agree with my colleague from Cape Breton Centre that to encourage the Minister, to encourage the company Xstrata to use local people. They have the knowledge and they have the expertise to make this work, Mr. Speaker. And having said all of that, again reiterating the fact that we as a caucus support this bill, and we'll agree to moving it along to law amendments for any further public input. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize the Honourable Minister to close the debate. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and particularly I welcome the remarks of members opposite who know much more about coal mining than I know, living in an area that's a coal mining centre, and so appreciate their support for this bill. And with those words, we'll close second reading.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 166. Is the House ready for the question? The question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 166, entitled An Act to Facilitate the Effective Regulation of Undersea Coal Mines in the Province.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. I understand the Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government's business for the day. I'd like to give the House Leader of the Official Opposition the opportunity to talk about tomorrow's business.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will meet from the hours of 2 to 6 tomorrow, and after the daily routine, we will be debating Resolution 19 and Bill 73. We now adjourn, Mr. Speaker.
The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.